The first light of dawn stretched across Fort Bragg like liquid gold, spilling over the vast expanse of the military base. Rows of jeeps, armored vehicles, and tents gleamed faintly in the morning sun. The scent of dew mixed with gunpowder and oil, a familiar aroma that made veterans tighten their grips on rifle slings and reminded new recruits of the reality they were stepping into. Lieutenant Mark Hawkins stood near the edge of the firing range, clipboard in hand, scanning the formations of soldiers. Every morning he repeated the ritual, checking equipment, ensuring targets were in place, and mentally preparing himself for the task of separating the competent from the mediocre. Hawk's eyes, sharp and calculating, missed nothing. Every twitch, every nervous glance from a recruit was logged in his mind like a code waiting to be deciphered. The usual morning chatter of recruits was punctuated by the clatter of boots on concrete and the occasional shouted correction from instructors. Most soldiers moved with practiced urgency, adrenaline sharp in their veins. But Hawk's attention was snagged by a figure that seemed out of place. A woman standing alone near the outer perimeter of the range, observing everything with a focused intensity that made her seem like she was measuring the world, not merely watching it. She was dressed in standard-issue combat fatigues, hair tucked neatly under a cap, boots polished yet worn in just the right places. Her stance was perfect, relaxed, but every muscle seemed poised, ready to react. Hawk frowned. He had seen thousands of soldiers, but something about her aura set her apart. There was no nervous energy, no rookie hesitation. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had been tested under fire, someone who had survived when most wouldn't. The morning briefing ended and soldiers were called to the firing line. Hawk's voice rang out, commanding attention. Next group, 500-yard targets. Step forward. Most soldiers shuffled hesitantly, glancing at each other, trying to mask their fear behind rigid postures. Hawk's eyes, however, found her. She stepped forward calmly, her movements deliberate, unhurried, yet carrying a weight of purpose. "You there?" Hawk barked. "Step forward." She obeyed without a flicker of doubt. She was calm, collected, almost unnervingly so. Whispers rippled down the line. Soldiers leaned on each other, their eyes wide. Some smirked nervously, assuming she was a civilian somehow granted access to the range, perhaps a visitor's curiosity gone too far. But there was something in the way she held herself, something that made even the most confident of soldiers hesitate. Hawk gestured to the firing line. "Set up, targets at 500 yards, let's see what you've got." She adjusted the rifle she had brought with her, sleek, well-maintained, with a scope that reflected the rising sun. There was no fumbling, no hesitation, no awkward alignment. Hawk noticed the small movements, the precision with which she adjusted the scope, the deliberate way she placed her fingers on the trigger. Every detail screamed experience. The first recruit fired. A round zipped through the air, grazing the edge of the target. The second recruit tried, hands shaking. The bullet struck but off-center, leaving an uneven hole. Hawk's eyes scanned the line, already noting who would need extra training, who would rise, and who would fail. Then she fired. The first round hit the exact center of the target. Hawk squinted through his binoculars, checking again. The hole was impossibly tight. She fired again, perfect. And again. With every shot, the target was punctuated with lethal precision. The whispers grew into stifled murmurs, the atmosphere thick with disbelief. Soldiers froze mid-motion, unable to reconcile the skill before them with the idea of normal training. Hawk's jaw tightened. He approached her, clipboard in hand, forcing a tone of authority into his voice. "Who taught you to handle a rifle like that?" She lowered the weapon, her eyes meeting his, steady, unflinching, like she was looking straight through him. "I learned on my own," she said softly, almost too casually. Hawk's heart thumped. "You're lying," he said, more to himself than to her. He had seen enough to recognize training that could only come from years of combat drills, hours under stress, and experience that went beyond ordinary marksmanship. The soldiers around them were silent now, mesmerized by her calm, unshakable demeanor. Some held their breath, afraid to break the spell of precision she exuded. Hawk scribbled notes on his clipboard, hands tight with tension. Finally, he asked the question that lingered in the minds of everyone within earshot. "How many shots did you fire?" She didn't hesitate. 5. The range went silent. Not a whisper, not a cough, not a footstep. 5 shots. 5 perfect shots. The impossibility of it hung in the air like a weight. Hawk felt the sweat bead at his temple. He wanted to speak, to question, to challenge her, yet nothing in him dared. This was beyond skill. This was something trained into survival instinct itself. One soldier muttered, almost under his breath, "No way." Another shook his head, disbelief etched across his features. "She can't be real." Hawk's mind raced. There were only a few scenarios in which someone could achieve this level of mastery. Elite sniper programs, special operations, or combat experience under extreme conditions. Yet her record, her paperwork, her background, all civilian. No history, no assignments, no mention of training. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We need to test this. Immediately, follow me." She followed without hesitation. The soldiers trailed at a distance, curiosity burning in their eyes. Hawk's pulse quickened. The calm confidence she carried was unsettling, almost like looking at a predator that didn't yet strike but had already won. Hawk guided her to a separate firing lane, isolated from the recruits, and laid out a more advanced target, a series of moving silhouettes at varied distances. "Show me 10 rounds at 700 yards, he said, trying to mask his awe with authority. She nodded. No words, just a nod. Hawk watched as she prepared her stance, adjusted the scope, measured the wind. Every detail of her preparation was meticulous. As the first shot rang out, hitting dead center, Hawk's pulse raced. The second, third, fourth, each one landed perfectly. Soldiers who had gathered silently behind barriers whispered in disbelief. When she finally finished, Hawk stepped forward, almost shaking. "How many shots?" Her lips curved faintly. 10. The silence was deafening. Hawk swallowed hard, realizing in that moment that he was not just witnessing skill. He was witnessing something extraordinary, someone forged in fire, trained in ways he could barely imagine. And for reasons he couldn't yet understand, he felt a mix of awe, fear, and anticipation. This was only the beginning. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows over the range. Hawk knew deep in his gut that the days ahead would not just test her, they would test everyone around her. And he had a feeling that the question of who she really was would soon demand answers that could change everything at Fort Bragg. Hawk didn't sleep well that night. Even in the dark silence of his quarters, the image of her perfect shots haunted him. 5, 10. Impossible numbers that should have been unattainable, yet there they were, etched into the targets, burned into his memory. He had spent years training soldiers, observing talent, and separating the exceptional from the mediocre. Yet no one had ever moved like her. Morning came in a pale wash of gray light. Mist hung low over the range, curling around the bases of the targets like ghosts. Hawk arrived early, clipboard in hand, tension coiling in his chest. Soldiers were already lining up, yawning, stretching, trying to shake off the lingering chill. But his focus was on one figure, the woman who had turned the entire range silent with a single answer. "All right," Hawk muttered to himself, scanning the horizon. He motioned her aside, away from the main line. "We need to test you," he said, his tone clipped, professional. But beneath it there was a tremor of something else, curiosity, fear, awe. She followed without a word. Her calm demeanor was unnerving. Hawk led her to a lane farther down the range, where he had set up a more complex scenario, a 700-yard distance, moving targets, and a wind simulation system capable of producing gusts strong enough to challenge even the best marksmen. This was designed for advanced recruits and seasoned soldiers alike. Most would fail. She had already passed the impossible. Hawk's hands shook slightly as he adjusted the wind machine. He didn't usually admit to fear, but today it wasn't the wind he was worried about. It was her. 10 rounds, he said, his voice betraying a note of disbelief. Let's see if you can do this under pressure. She nodded, no hesitation, no nervous glance, just that quiet, unwavering certainty that made every soldier watching from the sidelines hold their breath. The first shot rang out, dead center. Hawk blinked, adjusting the spotting scope, not even a hair's breadth off. The second shot, same precision. Third, fourth, fifth. Every round was clean, perfect. The wind gusted violently, shaking the scope and tossing leaves into the air. Other soldiers would have faltered, miscalculated, or overcompensated. Not her. She adjusted instinctively, micro-corrections almost imperceptible, her body moving like a well-oiled machine. Hawk swallowed hard, his eyes glued to the target. He had seen exceptional marksmen before, snipers who could hit still targets from hundreds of yards away. But moving targets, changing conditions, most failed after 3 or 4 rounds. She hadn't missed once. The whispers began among the gathered soldiers. How is this possible? Who trains like that? She's not human. Hawk felt a cold knot of unease in his stomach. Every instinct screamed that there was something hidden here, something he didn't understand. He had rules, regulations, protocols, and she had bypassed every expectation without even trying. He stepped forward. "How many shots have you taken so far?" he asked, his voice almost trembling. She looked at him calmly. 5. Hawk's stomach dropped. 5. That couldn't be. Every round he had counted, every target she had hit, how could 5 shots have produced such precision? His mind raced, trying to calculate angles, wind corrections, and recoil adjustments. Nothing added up. The wind picked up further. Hawk squinted at the moving silhouettes. "All right," he muttered under his breath. "Let's see if she falters under real pressure." She adjusted her stance again, eyes narrowing slightly. A deep breath, measured, controlled. And then she fired 5 more shots. Each one landed perfectly. 10 shots in total, 10 perfect hits. The range went utterly silent. Soldiers leaned against barriers, their mouths open, their disbelief palpable. Hawk couldn't hold it in any longer. Where did you learn to shoot like that?" he demanded, his voice rising, a mixture of command and desperation. For the first time she hesitated. A flicker of something, memory, pain, maybe regret, crossed her face. Then she said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself, "Intense training." Hawk's jaw tightened. Intense training. That wasn't a civilian phrase, that was a soldier's phrase. Someone who had survived long after the odds were stacked against them. His instincts screamed at him. She wasn't just skilled. She was combat-hardened, someone who had faced life-and-death scenarios and emerged alive. The soldiers nearby whispered among themselves. Some stepped back, uneasy. Others stared, fascinated. It wasn't just her skill, it was the aura she carried. A calm, deadly confidence that spoke of experiences they couldn't imagine. Hawk scribbled notes on his clipboard, hands shaking slightly. This wasn't about recruits anymore. This was about something else, someone else. He had to know more. He needed to understand who she was, what she had survived, and why she had come to this range. "Follow me," he said, lowering his voice. "We're going to run a controlled evaluation. I need to see every move, every decision you make. Are you ready for that?" She nodded. No hesitation, no fear. Just the quiet certainty that unnerved him more than any enemy he had faced. As they moved to the next part of the course, Hawk couldn't shake the feeling that the soldiers watching them weren't just witnessing a demonstration of skill. They were witnessing the arrival of someone extraordinary. Someone who could change everything they thought they knew about marksmanship, discipline, and survival. Hawk's eyes lingered on her as she set up her rifle, adjusting her stance. His mind raced through every possible scenario. Elite sniper training, special ops programs, covert missions, none of it matched what he was seeing. This was beyond training, beyond experience, beyond what he had ever imagined. And then he remembered the first question he had asked, the question that had silenced the entire range. How many shots did you fire? Her answer 5, 10, perfect, dead center. Hawk felt a chill run down his spine. Whoever she wasn't just a skilled marksman. She was something else entirely. And the moment he realized it, he knew this was only the beginning. The mist swirled around the targets, the rising sun glinting off metal and glass. Soldiers stood frozen, watching her every move. Hawk adjusted his grip on the clipboard, steeling himself for what came next. Because if she could do this in training, what could she do in the field? And more importantly, who had trained her to be this lethal, and why was she here under his command? The question lingered like smoke in the morning air, twisting and curling into every corner of the range. The silence stretched, pregnant with tension, as Hawk realized that the next few hours, the next few days, would not be ordinary. They would test him, the recruits, and the mysterious woman who had just redefined every expectation he had ever held. And deep down, he feared that some answers once revealed might change everything at Fort Bragg forever. The sun hung high over Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across the training field as Hawk paced near the edge of the range. His mind raced, replaying the previous day's events like a recording he couldn't stop. 5 shots, 10 shots, perfect hits at impossible distances. The woman, still unnamed in his mind, still a mystery, had shattered every expectation he held about marksmanship. Hawk had spent hours digging through her records, or what little existed. There were gaps, months unaccounted for, places she had lived or trained that left no trace in any official database. Civilian on paper, but in practice. She was a force that had survived circumstances Hawk didn't even want to imagine. He walked past the rows of soldiers, all buzzing quietly about what they had seen. Whispers followed him, eyes darting toward the lone woman who stood silently by the target line. Some were fascinated, some were scared. Hawk's gut told him all of them should be wary. Finally, Hawk could no longer contain his curiosity. He motioned her aside, away from the watchful eyes of recruits. "We need to talk," he said, voice low, commanding. "Now." She nodded, her calm demeanor unwavering. They walked toward the small cluster of storage sheds near the edge of the range. The wind picked up, stirring dust and dry leaves in the air. Hawk studied her closely. Her posture was perfect, her movements deliberate. Every step carried the quiet confidence of someone who had walked through fire and lived. "Tell me everything," Hawk demanded once they were alone. "Who trained you? Where have you been? How do you do this?" She hesitated. For the first time, Hawk noticed a flicker of something in her eyes, memory, maybe pain, or perhaps a shadow of fear. "I survived," she said simply, her voice quiet but steady. Hawk's brow furrowed. "Survived what? You're not a recruit, you're not listed in any of the training programs. These skills, they're not natural. You've had combat experience." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, her gaze drifted toward a nearby memorial plaque, a wall etched with the names of fallen soldiers. "Somewhere you wouldn't understand," she said softly. "Somewhere that teaches you to hit a target before it even moves." Hawk felt a chill run down his spine. Her words carried weight born of experience, of life-and-death situations. He had trained soldiers in special operations, in sniper tactics, in battlefield strategy. Yet her skill exceeded all he had seen, even among the best of his troops. The soldiers nearby had started to gather, whispering among themselves. Curiosity and awe buzzed in the air like static electricity. Hawk could feel their stares, and it only intensified the tension. This wasn't just about drills anymore. This was about a living legend, someone whose history defied records. "You need to prove it," Hawk said finally, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts in his head. "Not to me, to everyone here. Tomorrow I'm setting up the ultimate drill. Moving targets, extreme distances, wind adjustments, everything. Show them your limits, or prove that you have none." She met his gaze, calm, almost serene. "I don't have limits," she said, and Hawk felt the weight of that statement settle like a stone in his chest. He turned away, scanning the recruits. Some were openly staring, jaws slack, unable to comprehend what they had witnessed. Others exchanged uneasy glances, as if sensing that the calm, deadly presence standing on the range was a force beyond their comprehension. Hawk returned his gaze to her. Something about her presence unsettled him. Not fear in the traditional sense, no, it was more primal. Survival instinct flared within him. He had faced enemies in combat, in training exercises, in simulations. He had never met anyone like her. "Why now?" Hawk asked, his voice low. "Why show up here? Why not stay hidden?" Her eyes flicked to him, steady, unwavering. Sometimes you hide to survive. Sometimes you step forward to remind the world you exist. The soldiers around them began to murmur again. Hawk could see the mixture of awe and unease on their faces. Some tried to mask their fear with admiration. Others didn't bother. She radiated an aura that demanded respect, even from the bravest of men. Hawk clenched his jaw. He realized that her presence would change the dynamics of the entire unit. Her skill, her calm, her precision, it wasn't just remarkable. It was dangerous. Dangerous in a way that forced people to confront their own limitations. He thought back to the first question he had asked her, the one that had silenced the range. "How many shots did you fire?" Her answer, 5. Perfect, devastating, impossible. The recruits had whispered, stared, and some had even laughed nervously, thinking it was a trick. Hawk knew it was. This was real. Every shot she fired carried authority, precision, and a quiet ruthlessness that left no room for error. Hawk exhaled slowly. "Tomorrow you run the ultimate drill," he said, finally breaking the tension in his chest. "I want to see everything. Every calculation, every breath, every movement. I want to see what makes you you." She nodded, her expression unreadable. "I'll be ready." As she turned to leave, Hawk felt a strange sense of unease. She walked with purpose, moving with a grace that suggested both discipline and lethal efficiency. It was almost as if she had been trained not just to shoot, but to move, to survive, to dominate. The wind picked up again, whipping across the range and rattling the metal targets. Hawk glanced at the targets she had mastered, the holes perfectly grouped, the angles precise. Even after hours of study, he could find no flaw, no imperfection. He knew then that her story wasn't just about skill. It was about survival, about experience, about a life that had forced her to master every instinct, every movement, every shot. And deep down, Hawk felt a chill, because he realized that the drills, the tests, the entire military structure, they were not designed for someone like her. She was beyond all of it. And Hawk knew with an uncomfortable certainty that the next day's drill would not just test her skill, it would test the limits of everyone around her. The soldiers, the instructors, even Hawk himself, because she wasn't just extraordinary, she was something else entirely, something that defied expectation and demanded recognition. As the sun climbed higher, casting harsh light over the range, Hawk returned to his post, clipboard in hand. He scanned the soldiers, the equipment, the targets, but his mind was elsewhere, tracing the impossible paths of her training, her history, her very existence. She was a mystery, a puzzle, a force of nature. And Hawk knew, with a certainty that left his chest tight, that he was witnessing only the beginning of a story that would shake the range, the base, and perhaps even the world beyond Fort Bragg. The wind carried her figure across the targets one last time as she disappeared behind a cluster of trees. Hawk exhaled slowly, knowing that tomorrow everything would change. Because the question remained, who was she? And what had forged a human being capable of such impossible mastery? The silence of the range stretched long and tense, filled with unspoken curiosity, fear, and awe. Soldiers whispered among themselves, but none dared approach. Even Hawk felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. And deep in his gut, he knew, the revelation of her past, her training, and her true identity would be a story that no one would see coming. The range had gone silent once before, but tomorrow the world might never recover. The sun rose with a fiery glow over Fort Bragg, casting long, jagged shadows across the training field. Hawk walked along the edge of the range, clipboard in hand, tension coiling in his chest like a live wire. Today was no ordinary day. Today, the ultimate drill would separate the ordinary from the extraordinary, and he knew, deep down, that the extraordinary had already arrived. The recruits assembled quietly, a mix of excitement and nervous energy crackling through the air. Some whispered about the woman who had silenced the range with 5 shots. Others stared openly, mouths slightly agape, unable to mask their disbelief. The instructors exchanged worried glances. Hawk could feel it too, the energy of anticipation, of awe, of unspoken fear. He motioned the woman forward. Her calm presence contrasted sharply with the nervous energy of everyone else. She moved with the same quiet confidence, her eyes scanning the setup as though memorizing every detail in seconds. Hawk noted how she adjusted her stance, how her fingers hovered over the rifle with micro-level precision, and how her breathing, even in the high tension of the morning, remained steady. "All right," Hawk said, raising his voice to command attention. "This drill will test everything: distance, moving targets, wind, decision-making under stress. You're going to lead a squad, show them how it's done. I want every shot counted, every decision timed. This is the ultimate test. Are you ready?" She nodded. No words, just that quiet, unwavering gaze that made him wonder what she had seen in her life to cultivate such composure. The drill began. Soldiers fumbled almost immediately. The targets were moving unpredictably, some swaying, some spinning, some disappearing behind simulated obstacles. The wind gusted violently, tossing leaves, kicking up dust, and challenging every shooter's aim. Most of the recruits faltered within the first few rounds. Shots went wide. Bullets struck the ground or ricocheted harmlessly past targets. Panic rippled through the squad. But she moved like a shadow through chaos. Her movements were fluid, precise, almost preternatural. She tracked targets, adjusted for wind, accounted for distance, all instinct, all calculation, all survival. Her rifle rose and fell with a rhythm that left no margin for error. One recruit panicked, fumbling a shot that could have endangered the team in the simulation. Hawk's eyes widened. Most instructors would have shouted, reprimanded, or intervened, but she reacted instantly. A single hand motion, a shift in stance, and the errant bullet's trajectory was corrected before it reached the friendly simulation markers. The other soldiers froze in awe. Hawk muttered under his breath, "She's unreal." Rounds rang out in precise succession. Targets fell one by one, some moving, some appearing for only a split second. Each shot landed exactly where she intended. The recruits began to follow her lead, their initial hesitation replaced by cautious admiration, attempting to mimic her calm focus and precision. Hawk couldn't take his eyes off her. Every micro-adjustment of her body, every breath timed to the pull of the trigger, every calculation for trajectory and wind, it was flawless. She was teaching them without speaking, leading without commanding, dominating without arrogance. Then came the ultimate test, the erratic drone. Hawk had programmed it to move unpredictably across the range, changing altitude and speed in ways that challenged even the most seasoned marksmen. He watched, barely daring to breathe, as she adjusted her scope and tracked the drone's path. Time seemed to slow. Every soldier around the range held their breath. Hawk counted silently, 1, 2, 3. And then she fired. The drone spiraled out of control, crashing into the ground with a metallic screech. Silence. Absolute silence. Hawk walked over, heart pounding, still unsure if he had witnessed reality or some strange illusion. "How many shots?" he asked, his voice low and trembling with disbelief. 3, she replied, calm, almost detached. The range went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Soldiers blinked, struggling to comprehend what they had just witnessed. 3 shots, 3 impossibly precise shots that destroyed a moving target that had been engineered to defy human skill. Hawk felt his pulse quicken. This was no longer about drills, about training, or even leadership. This was something far beyond, a living weapon of skill, experience, and instinct that defied the limits of ordinary soldiers. The recruits whispered among themselves, a mix of fear, awe, and confusion. Some were inspired. Others were intimidated to the point of paralysis. Hawk could see it in their eyes. They realized that she wasn't just extraordinary, she was on another level entirely. He approached her, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. "Tell me," he said, lowering his voice, "where does this come from? How do you move like that, think like that, survive like that?" She hesitated, eyes narrowing slightly. For the first time, Hawk thought he might see a crack in her calm exterior. Then she spoke softly, almost to herself. "Survival, training, life that demanded precision. Mistakes weren't allowed. Death wasn't optional." Hawk's chest tightened. He had faced enemies in combat who had been fearless, ruthless, and experienced. Yet her words, her presence, her skill, it suggested something far deeper. Something that went beyond physical training into the realm of experience forged under fire, under threat, under impossible conditions. The recruits continued to stare, whispers spreading like wildfire. "She's a ghost," one muttered. "She's not human," another said. Hawk forced himself to breathe. He had to contain the situation, had to maintain order, had to keep the drill under control. But inside, he was shaking. She had revealed skill that could change the rules of engagement, the expectations of training, and the perception of what a soldier could achieve. He realized then that the ultimate drill had not just tested her, it had tested everyone around her. The soldiers had learned quickly that ordinary expectations did not apply. Discipline alone could not prepare them for someone like her. Strategy could not anticipate her decisions. And even Hawk, seasoned sniper instructor, had been forced to confront the limits of his understanding. She lowered her rifle, the wind whipping strands of hair across her face, and exhaled slowly. Calm, collected, yet lethal in every movement. Hawk felt both awe and unease. She was perfect in a way that unsettled him, in a way that challenged his authority and understanding. He scribbled notes furiously, heart pounding. Not about her skill, anyone could be trained, theoretically, but about her instinct, her timing, her ability to read chaos and respond with lethal precision. That was something innate, something forged by circumstances far beyond the confines of this training range. "Tomorrow," Hawk muttered under his breath, "we go further, we see if she has limits." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. There were no limits, not for her, only questions. And the most pressing question of all remained, who was she? The wind carried her figure across the targets one last time before she disappeared behind a cluster of trees. Hawk exhaled, a mixture of awe, fear, and anticipation tightening his chest. The ultimate drill had been more than a test of skill, it had been a revelation. A revelation that would change the range, the soldiers, and Hawk himself forever. The sun climbed higher, shadows shifting across the range, and Hawk realized that the challenge was only beginning. Because her skill, her precision, her calm, they weren't just impressive. They were dangerous, and whatever had forged her into the living weapon standing on his range was a story he had yet to uncover. And Hawk knew, deep in his gut, that the next test, the next mission, would push everyone to their limits, and perhaps reveal the secret she had hidden for so long. The afternoon sun hung low over Fort Bragg, casting long golden shadows across the range. The day's drills were finished, but Hawk couldn't shake the tension that clung to his chest. The ultimate drill had revealed what he already suspected. She was not ordinary. She was something far beyond training, beyond experience, beyond the skills of anyone he had ever encountered. Hawk found her sitting alone by the riverbank near the edge of the base, the gentle flow of water contrasting sharply with the storm of unease he felt inside. Her rifle leaned against a tree, and she stared at the rippling surface of the water, eyes distant, unreadable. He approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "We need to talk," he said, keeping his voice low. The sound of rushing water seemed louder than usual, as though the world itself was holding its breath. She didn't turn to him immediately. Instead, she remained still, calm, as if weighing his presence. Hawk noticed the faint scars along her knuckles, the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes carried a quiet weight he couldn't yet understand. "You're hiding something," he said bluntly. "Every instinct I have says you've been through combat, real combat. Am I right?" She finally turned to him, her gaze steady, unflinching. Hawk felt a chill. There was no hesitation, no flicker of deceit. She simply said, "I have." Hawk's chest tightened. "Where? Who trained you? This isn't just skill, it's survival, instinct, and experience that no one here has. You're not a civilian, you're something else." She remained silent for a long moment. Then she spoke softly, almost too quietly for him to hear over the river's flow. "There are things you can't unsee, people you can't save. I was trained to do a job where mistakes meant death. That's why I never miss. That's why I can't afford to." Hawk's hands clenched at his sides. He had faced danger before, but he had never confronted someone who carried trauma, precision, and lethal skill so effortlessly intertwined. Her words painted a picture of someone forged under circumstances that would have broken ordinary soldiers, and yet she stood before him, calm, poised, deadly. "I need details," Hawk said, trying to maintain authority. "I need to know who you are, what you've survived, and why you're here." She sighed, a sound that carried both exhaustion and resignation. "Some things I can't tell, not yet, but I can show you why I'm here." Her eyes, usually so steady, flickered with a trace of vulnerability, a rare crack in her otherwise unshakable facade. Hawk exhaled slowly. He had expected evasions, lies, half-truths, but this was different. She wasn't hiding behind arrogance or secrecy. She was hiding something heavier, the weight of life-and-death experiences, of missions executed in the shadows, of survival that demanded perfection. "You're not just here to prove skill," Hawk said, realization dawning. "You're here to test us, to test everything we think we know about training, about precision, about survival, and you've already passed every expectation." She nodded slightly. "I don't do this for approval, I do this because it matters. Lives depend on it. Every shot counts. Every decision counts. That's the difference between surviving and not surviving." Hawk felt a knot in his stomach. He had trained soldiers to lead, to fight, to survive. But she wasn't teaching them. She was rewriting the rules. Every movement, every shot, every micro-adjustment was a lesson in survival under conditions most could not imagine. The recruits were still talking about her performance, some admiring, some intimidated, some simply awed. Hawk had to wonder how they would process the truth once it was revealed, if it ever could be fully understood. "Why come here?" Hawk asked finally, unable to contain his curiosity. "Why this base? Why these drills?" Her gaze drifted to the distant hills. "Because this is where they can see it. This is where they can understand, in part, what it takes to survive, what it means to never miss. I need them to see the truth, even if they can't grasp it completely, and I need to see if I can trust them." Hawk swallowed hard. "Trust? You trust no one." She shook her head slowly. "Trust is a luxury when your life depends on your skill. When a mistake means someone dies, trust becomes a calculation, not an emotion." Hawk realized then that this was more than a conversation about skill. This was a window into her past, a past filled with danger, discipline, and death. Every word she spoke was measured, careful, revealing just enough to hint at a life that had been shaped by extremes. "And your name?" Hawk asked finally, needing at least that small anchor to hold on to. She hesitated, then softly, "Some call me Alex, that's enough for now." Alex, a simple name, but it carried weight. Hawk realized he had been thinking of her as a mystery, as an anomaly, as something beyond human. But now she had given him something concrete, a thread he could grasp, however tenuous. Hawk studied her, noting the faint tension in her jaw, the way her hands flexed unconsciously near the river's edge, the slight narrowing of her eyes. She was trained to survive, yes, but also trained to hide her vulnerabilities, to move through the world like a ghost until circumstances demanded she reveal herself. "I need to know if you're ready for the next step," Hawk said, his voice firm but gentle. "The next drill will push everyone here to their limits. It will test leadership, precision, and decision-making under chaos. Can you handle that?" Alex's lips curved slightly, a ghost of a smile. "I've handled worse." Hawk felt a shiver run down his spine. There was admiration in his chest, respect, and a twinge of fear. She wasn't just a soldier. She was a force of nature, tempered by experience and honed to perfection. And he knew with an uneasy certainty that her presence had already shifted everything about this base, the soldiers, the training, and even him. He took a deep breath. "Tomorrow," he said, "we see how far this goes, we see what you can really do." Alex nodded once, her gaze drifting back to the flowing river. "Then tomorrow will come, and we'll see who can keep up." Hawk watched her, the sunlight glinting off her rifle, the shadows playing across her face. He knew the next drill would be more than just a test of skill. It would be a test of nerves, instinct, and courage. And deep down, he feared the answers they would uncover not just about her, but about the limits of everyone present. The recruits continued to murmur behind him, unaware of the depth of what had just occurred. Hawk exhaled slowly, trying to steady his thoughts. The ultimate drill would not just test the extraordinary skill of Alex. It would test the resolve, the composure, and the courage of every soldier who dared to follow her lead. And Hawk knew one thing with certainty. When the next challenge came, nothing would be the same again. The range had already been silenced once by her skill, and it would never return to the way it had been before. Alex stood, shoulders squared, eyes steady. Hawk could feel the weight of what was to come, and he understood she wasn't just preparing for a drill. She was preparing for the reality of what lay ahead, for challenges that would demand everything from her and from everyone around her. The river flowed quietly, indifferent to the tension, the anticipation, the unspoken questions hanging heavy in the air. And Hawk realized with a shiver that the real test was not yet complete. The revelation of her past had begun, but the full truth, the reasons for her presence, the depths of her skill, the shadows she carried, were still waiting to emerge. And when they did, no one would ever be the same. The morning air at Fort Bragg was thick with tension. Mist clung to the edges of the range, curling around sandbags and obstacles like silent sentinels. Hawk stood at the far end of the field, clipboard in hand, his eyes scanning the recruits and instructors alike. Today wasn't just another training exercise. It was the ultimate high-stakes drill, designed to test not only marksmanship but leadership, decision-making, and the ability to remain calm under extreme pressure. The recruits murmured nervously among themselves. Some tried to mask their fear with bravado, others with silence, and a few simply stared wide-eyed at the lone figure standing confidently by the target line. Alex, calm, poised, deadly. The whispers that had started days earlier had become a quiet hum of awe and unease. Hawk cleared his throat. "Listen up," his voice cut through the mist, commanding attention. "Today's drill will test your limits. Moving targets, hostage simulations, variable wind conditions. Every decision you make will have consequences. Follow orders, think fast, and remember mistakes are not just mistakes today. They're failures to execute under pressure." He turned to Alex. "You lead the first squad, set the pace, make the calls, show them how it's done." She nodded once, a small, deliberate motion. Her eyes flicked over the recruits, nodding posture, positioning, and readiness with the precision of someone who had been analyzing threats for years. Hawk watched her closely, his gut tightening. He had seen natural leaders before, but this was different. This was tactical genius wrapped in calm, lethal efficiency. The drill began. The first wave of targets appeared, moving dummies designed to simulate hostile combatants. Recruits fired wildly, some hitting their targets, many missing entirely. Panic rippled through the squad as the simulation intensified. Smoke grenades, sudden noise blasts, and unpredictable target movement. Alex moved like a shadow, fluid, precise, every step calculated. She called out commands, short, efficient, directing recruits to positions that maximized their safety and effectiveness. Her voice was calm but firm, carrying authority without arrogance. Soldiers began to follow her lead, adjusting positions, anticipating movement, and timing their shots with surprising coordination. Hawk noted the difference immediately. Where other recruits panicked, Alex's squad adapted. Where others hesitated, her squad executed. Each shot she fired was calculated, lethal, yet precise. Every motion, every call, every adjustment was a lesson in survival. Then came the next layer, the hostage simulation. A moving target now carried a mannequin representing a civilian. The recruits had to neutralize the threat without harming the hostage. Most faltered instantly, nerves betraying their aim. Hawk's pulse quickened. This scenario was designed to test skill and judgment, and most would fail. Alex assessed the situation in seconds. She adjusted her scope, calculated angles, factored in wind and distance, and then delivered 3 precise shots, disabling the threat while leaving the hostage untouched. The recruits watched, awestruck, as she repeated the maneuver with different targets, each success flawless. Hawk exhaled slowly, feeling the tension in the air thicken. He had trained soldiers to handle stress, to lead under pressure, to execute complex maneuvers. But what he was witnessing was beyond training. It was instinct honed by impossible experience. The wind shifted violently, kicking up dust and debris. Most soldiers struggled to maintain accuracy. Alex adjusted, factoring in the gusts with micro-level corrections, her movements almost imperceptible. Every shot landed exactly where intended. Every command executed with clarity and authority. Hawk couldn't take his eyes off her. He realized that she wasn't just participating in the drill, she was redefining it. Every mistake the recruits made was corrected by her guidance. Every successful action they performed was directly influenced by her example. Then came the final challenge, the moving target array. Multiple targets appeared at random intervals, some appearing briefly, others moving rapidly across the range. Hawk had designed this scenario specifically to test whether anyone could anticipate and adapt under extreme pressure. Most recruits froze. Some fired wildly. Many failed to hit anything. Alex didn't hesitate. She analyzed the movements, adjusted her stance, and fired with perfect timing. Target after target fell in succession. Her precision and timing were flawless. Hawk felt a chill run down his spine. He had seen exceptional marksmen in his career, but nothing like this. A recruit stumbled, panicked, and misfired. Alex reacted instantly, redirecting them with a quick hand signal, positioning, and a short command. The recruit regained composure, fired accurately, and hit the next target. Hawk realized that she wasn't just lethal, she was a teacher, a leader, and a tactical strategist all in one. The drill concluded with a simulated extraction scenario. The recruits had to navigate an obstacle course under fire, evacuate the hostage, and neutralize remaining threats. Most would fail. Hawk expected chaos. Instead, Alex's squad moved with cohesion, executing the extraction flawlessly. Every action was precise, every decision correct, every movement deliberate. Hawk lowered his clipboard, a mixture of awe and unease washing over him. He knew she had just demonstrated something unprecedented. This wasn't just skill. This wasn't just leadership. This was a combination of experience, instinct, and survival that defied conventional understanding. As the recruits regrouped, breathing heavily, some exhilarated, others shaken, Hawk approached Alex. "How do you do it?" he asked quietly. "Every shot, every decision, every move perfect." She looked at him, calm, unflinching. I've survived situations where perfection was the only option, where mistakes weren't allowed, where hesitation meant death." Hawk nodded slowly, understanding dawning. "You've seen things most people can't even imagine, and you've lived through them." She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "That's why I don't hesitate, that's why I never miss." Hawk exhaled, realizing the full weight of what he was witnessing. This was more than a drill. This was a revelation. Alex wasn't just a soldier. She was a force forged by experience, honed by survival, and tempered by necessity. The recruits whispered among themselves, some awed, some intimidated. Hawk could see the mixture of admiration and fear in their eyes. He knew they would remember this day forever, not just as a drill, but as a demonstration of something extraordinary, something beyond comprehension. Hawk turned to Alex, his expression serious. "Tomorrow we go further. I want to see how far this goes. I need to know your limits if you even have any." She looked at him calm, eyes steady. "I've already shown you there are none." Hawk felt a chill. She was right. There were no limits, not for her, and the realization sent a ripple of unease through him. The next challenge would push everyone, recruits, instructors, and Hawk himself, to the edge. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the range, Hawk watched her walk away, the wind stirring her hair, the rifle slung across her back. He knew the next day would bring answers, questions, and challenges he wasn't sure anyone was ready for. And deep in his gut, he understood one thing with terrifying clarity. Whatever came next, nothing and no one would ever be the same again. The wind carried her figure across the targets one last time as she disappeared behind a cluster of trees. Hawk exhaled slowly, realizing that today had not just tested skill, it had tested the very definition of human precision, instinct, and survival. And tomorrow, the real test would begin. Dawn broke over Fort Bragg with a pale, cold light. The mist hung low over the training grounds, curling around the sandbags and concrete barriers like fingers of fog creeping over the earth. Today's drill was no ordinary exercise. Hawk had designed it to push every soldier, to test precision, adaptability, decision-making, and resilience under extreme pressure. But for Alex, it was something else entirely. A test not just of skill, but of endurance, instinct, and mental fortitude. Hawk stood at the edge of the range, clipboard in hand, watching as the recruits assembled. The nervous energy was palpable. Some fidgeted, some whispered, others stared openly at the woman who had already rewritten the rules of marksmanship and leadership on this base. Alex was calm, her eyes scanning the range with precision, analyzing every obstacle, every target, every wind gust. Her rifle rested lightly in her hands, her posture poised yet relaxed. Hawk felt a flicker of unease. He had seen soldiers falter under stress. He had seen panic take hold even in trained recruits. But Alex, she was beyond that. She was a force that turned chaos into order. "All right," Hawk called, voice firm, cutting through the morning mist. "Today's drill will simulate real-world combat. Hostages, multiple moving threats, extreme distances, and unpredictable conditions. Every decision counts. Every shot matters, and Alex," he paused, meeting her gaze, "you lead the first squad." She nodded once, a motion precise and deliberate. Her calm confidence unsettled the recruits. They had followed her before, but today would demand more than imitation. Today, they had to trust her instincts, instincts honed by experience none of them could imagine. The drill began. The first wave of moving targets appeared, some running across the field, some ducking behind obstacles, some appearing for only a split second before disappearing again. Most recruits fired blindly, missing targets or hesitating too long. Panic rippled through the squad, whispers of doubt and fear trailing in their wake. Alex didn't hesitate. She fired first, her shots precise and lethal, hitting targets that seemed impossible to strike. Her movements were fluid, almost imperceptible, yet calculated to perfection. She called out orders, directing recruits to positions that maximized coverage and minimized exposure. Each command was short, efficient, and unmistakably clear. Hawk watched in tense silence as the squad began to move in sync under her guidance. Where chaos had dominated, coordination emerged. Where hesitation had reigned, confidence now thrived. Alex's leadership transformed uncertainty into action. The second wave introduced simulated hostages, mannequins carried by moving targets designed to mimic civilians in danger zones. The recruits froze, unsure how to proceed. Most would have panicked, firing recklessly. But Alex's calm, measured voice cut through the tension. Left flank, cover the exit. Sniper, disable only the threat. Timing, wait for the angle. Her orders were precise, her strategy flawless. One by one, targets were neutralized without endangering the hostages. Hawk's pulse quickened. He had seen skilled marksmen before, but nothing like this. Nothing that combined instinct, precision, and decision-making under pressure with such seamless grace. Then came the drone simulation, erratic, fast-moving, and designed to test even elite snipers. Hawk's heart pounded as he watched Alex raise her rifle, tracking the drone's unpredictable flight path. She calculated trajectory, distance, wind, every factor in a heartbeat. One shot, two shots, three shots, the drone spiraled to the ground, disabled. A perfect strike. A recruit stumbled, panic etched across his face. Alex reacted instantly, repositioning him, giving concise instructions that prevented disaster. The squad recovered, firing accurately under her guidance. Hawk felt a mix of awe and fear. She wasn't just skilled, she was a teacher, a strategist, a leader who could control chaos with lethal precision. But Hawk knew the final test was still coming. The extraction scenario, multiple threats, hostile zones, obstacles, and the simulated hostage needed evacuation. Most recruits would fail. Some would panic. But Alex moved through the chaos like a shadow, guiding the squad with unwavering authority. Every movement, every decision, every shot was perfect. Hawk's clipboard trembled in his hands. He realized he was witnessing more than skill. He was witnessing instinct perfected by experience, honed by survival, and executed with a precision that defied ordinary human capability. Then the unexpected happened. The simulation introduced a new variable, a sudden, violent explosion near the extraction zone. Smoke, dust, debris, and chaos erupted, obscuring vision and disorienting the recruits. Most froze. Panic flared. Shots rang out wildly, missing targets, striking obstacles. Hawk's stomach tightened. This was the moment most would fail. But Alex moved with the calm of someone who had lived through true danger, someone who had faced death and returned unbroken. She recalculated, adjusted, and executed flawless decisions. Every recruit under her guidance adapted. Every target was neutralized. The hostage was safely extracted. The drill concluded. Silence hung over the range. Recruits and instructors alike stared at Alex in disbelief. Hawk approached her slowly, heart pounding. How do you do it?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper. She looked at him, eyes steady, voice calm. Survival isn't about talent, it's about experience, about learning to anticipate chaos, to control it when everyone else can't. When mistakes cost lives, you learn quickly. Hawk exhaled slowly, realizing the weight of her words. This wasn't just about drills or training. This was a glimpse into the life of someone who had walked through fire, navigated danger, and emerged not just unscathed, but perfected. The recruits whispered among themselves, awestruck, some terrified, some inspired. Hawk understood immediately that her presence had changed the dynamic of the base forever. She was not just a soldier. She was a force that redefined what human capability could be under pressure. Hawk's thoughts turned to her past, the fragments she had revealed, the scars she carried, the calm authority that belied untold danger. He knew there were truths she had not shared, experiences she had survived, and secrets that, if revealed, would explain the almost supernatural precision she exhibited. He approached her, determination and curiosity mingling in equal measure. "Tomorrow, we push further. I need to see your limits if you even have any. Are you ready for that?" Her lips curved in the faintest hint of a smile. "I've already shown you there are none," she replied, eyes steady and unwavering. Hawk felt a chill. She was right. There were no limits, not for her, and the realization brought with it both awe and fear. The next challenge would push everyone, recruits, instructors, and Hawk himself, to the edge of human capability. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the range, Hawk watched her walk away, rifle slung across her back, shoulders squared. He knew the next day would bring not just a test of skill, but revelations, truths about her past, her training, and the experiences that had forged her into the extraordinary soldier standing before them all. And Hawk understood one thing with clarity: whatever came next, nothing and no one would ever be the same again. The mist swirled over the range, carrying with it the silent tension of anticipation. Soldiers whispered, instructors exchanged uneasy glances, and Hawk felt the weight of the unknown pressing down. Alex had proven herself in skill, leadership, and precision, but the story of who she was and how she had become what she was remained a mystery. The final question hung in the air. What had forged this living weapon, and what would she reveal when pushed to her ultimate limits? And Hawk knew the answer would change everything. The sun rose crimson over Fort Bragg, casting a fiery glow across the range. Hawk stood at the edge of the field, clipboard in hand, the weight of anticipation pressing down on him like a storm about to break. Today was more than a drill. It was the culmination of everything he had witnessed over the past days: Alex's unmatched skill, her leadership, and the quiet, unnerving precision that had silenced the range and the recruits alike. The soldiers assembled, eyes wide, whispers buzzing through the ranks. None of them knew exactly what to expect. The drills had escalated every day, pushing their limits, testing coordination, timing, and nerves. But today, Hawk intended to see the truth, the limits of Alex, if there were any. Alex stood at the starting line, calm, composed, her rifle slung over her shoulder. She exuded an aura of quiet authority that silenced the field before Hawk could even call the exercise to order. The recruits stared, some in awe, others with a hint of fear. They had followed her guidance before, but this would be unlike anything they had experienced. "Today," Hawk began, his voice cutting through the morning air, "we test everything: precision, leadership, adaptability, decision-making under chaos. This is the final drill, and it's designed to push you to your absolute limits. Failures today will be lessons, successes will be legendary." He turned to Alex. "You lead the squad, show them the way, show them how far they can go if they can keep up with you." She nodded once, a simple motion, but it carried the weight of authority and experience. Hawk felt a shiver run down his spine. He had already seen her at work. He had already witnessed the impossible, and yet something in her calm demeanor suggested today would reveal even more. The first wave of targets appeared, multiple moving targets, some appearing for mere seconds, some weaving unpredictably behind obstacles. Most recruits fired blindly, missing or hesitating, faltering under pressure. Panic rippled through the squad like an infection. Alex didn't flinch. She analyzed the movements instantly, calculated trajectory, distance, wind, and timing all in seconds, and fired. Each shot was precise, each target neutralized flawlessly. Then she directed the recruits, repositioning them with calm, deliberate commands, correcting mistakes before they could escalate. The chaos began to obey her. Hawk felt a mix of awe and unease. This wasn't just training. This was a demonstration of instinct perfected by experience, honed under extreme conditions, and executed with a precision that defied explanation. The second wave introduced hostages, live simulations carried by moving targets, forcing the squad to neutralize threats without endangering civilians. Most recruits froze. Fear dominated their actions, but Alex remained unshaken. Her commands were sharp, her strategy flawless. Threats were neutralized, hostages secured, and the squad moved like a well-oiled machine. Then came the final challenge. The erratic drone array combined with dynamic obstacles. Targets moved unpredictably. Smoke grenades and simulated explosions added chaos, and every shot counted. Hawk held his breath. This was designed to be impossible. Most soldiers would fail. Alex tracked each target with unmatched precision, firing only when the trajectory was perfect. 1, 2, 3, target after target fell. Her squad followed her lead, executing commands seamlessly under the chaos. Hawk realized with a growing sense of dread that this was no longer a drill. This was a demonstration of skill beyond human limits. After the final target fell, the dust settled. Silence enveloped the range. Recruits whispered, staring at Alex with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Hawk approached her, chest tight, heart pounding. How, he began, struggling to find words. How do you do it? Every shot, every decision, every movement, flawless. Alex looked at him, her eyes steady, calm, yet carrying a weight he hadn't seen before. I've lived through situations where failure meant death, she said softly. Where hesitation meant losing everything. That's why I move like this. That's why I never miss. Survival teaches you things training never can. Hawk exhaled slowly, the enormity of her words sinking in. This was more than skill. This was survival honed into art, a life forged in conditions that most could not even imagine. Every decision she had made, every movement, every precise calculation was born from experience, a history hidden from the world until now. He studied her closely and finally asked the question he had been holding back. Who trained you? Where did this come from? Alex's gaze softened, and for the first time Hawk glimpsed a trace of vulnerability. I was trained where no one would ever know, she said. Operations in places you've only read about. Missions with consequences that don't appear in reports. Lives depended on perfection every time. There were no second chances, no room for error. Hawk swallowed hard. And that's what brought you here. Yes, she said, her voice quiet but firm. To remind them and you what it takes to survive, to lead, to never ever miss. The recruits listened in silence, their fear mixed with awe. Hawk realized that Alex had revealed not just skill, but a window into a world beyond military manuals and training programs. She was proof that experience, survival, and instinct could surpass anything learned in drills or simulations. Hawk nodded slowly, understanding dawning. You're not just extraordinary, he said, voice low. You're beyond comprehension, and now we've seen it firsthand. Alex exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. I didn't come here to impress. I came here to prepare them and you for reality. Because one day they will face situations where hesitation isn't an option, where skill alone won't save them, and they'll need to trust instinct, to trust themselves. Hawk felt a chill. He realized she was right. The ultimate drill had not just tested skill. It had tested courage, trust, and composure under conditions most soldiers would never experience. And Alex had rewritten the rules of what human precision, instinct, and leadership could achieve. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the range, the recruits, and Alex. Hawk understood something fundamental. This woman had changed everything. She had proven that limits could be pushed, expectations shattered, and fear conquered. And she had revealed in fragments the story of someone forged by impossible circumstances, someone who had survived where others would have failed. Hawk exhaled slowly, finally allowing himself a measure of awe. Alex, you've shown us all something we'll never forget. She nodded once, shoulders squared, gaze steady. Then remember it, learn from it, and never forget skill alone isn't enough. Survival demands precision, courage, and the willingness to act when others hesitate. The recruits whispered among themselves, some inspired, others still in awe. Hawk watched her walk away, rifle slung across her back, the sunlight catching in her hair. He realized the truth. She was more than a soldier, more than a marksman. She was a force of nature, tempered by experience, honed by survival, and destined to leave a mark on everyone who witnessed her. As the range fell silent once more, Hawk knew that the story of Alex, the woman who silenced the range with 5 shots and transformed chaos into order, was far from over. She had revealed enough to awe and challenge, but the full story of her life, her missions, and the battles that had forged her skill would remain a legend, one that would inspire, intimidate, and mystify all who heard it. And as she disappeared into the distance, Hawk understood with certainty. Nothing and no one would ever be the same again.